Welcome, Middlers, to the Medium in the Middle podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I take you on a journey of self-discovery and spiritual exploration. I am a Reiki master teacher, a spiritual and business mentor, and of course, a psychic medium. And I am here to share my story and help you tap into your extraordinary abilities. Join me every Wednesday as we dive into the realms of intuition, energy healing, and all things mystical. Whether you're a seasoned spiritual seeker or just dipping your toes into the magical waters, this podcast is your go-to source for inspiration, guidance, and a whole lot of lessons and laughter along the way. Let's get started. Hello, Middlers. Welcome to episode 296. My name is Stephanie. I am the medium in the middle, and today we are talking about the Aphantasia test. I posted something on Instagram about how you see things in your mind's eye and that we all don't see things the same way. And it gained a lot of traction and conversation in the comments. So I want to talk about it here on the podcast so that you know you're not alone. When we all see things, we are seeing different things. And some of us see nothing. So before we begin this episode, if you want to quickly just Google the Aphantasia test, it'll show you a bunch of photos and you can see if you are 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 when you visualize things. But we are going to be talking about this today because there's been a lot of questions about, can you change? Can you get better? If you don't see anything, can you work on seeing things? And I think this is a very interesting conversation to have, especially when it comes to spirit and mediumship and intuition. Not everybody sees things, and that's okay. You want to play to your strengths, and everyone will have different strengths. You might know things a lot. You might feel things more. So just knowing what your strength is and not fighting for something that you don't have, focusing on your strengths will really support you. So to test out what level you are for the Aphantasia Scale, we're going to do a very simple exercise. I want you to imagine an apple. Imagine an apple sitting on a desk. Can you see the color of the apple? Can you see the edges of the apple? Can you see maybe the stem up top? Does the apple have a leaf attached to it? Is there lighting on the apple? How clearly can you see this apple? If you close your eyes in your mind's eye, can you see an apple in your mind? So aphantasia is the inability to voluntarily visualize mental images. If you see nothing, that is normal. There is a percentage of the population where people cannot visualize things. So when you use the example of counting sheep or imagine yourself on a beach, there are some people who didn't know that they were actually counting and seeing sheep, or it wasn't just a figure of speech to imagine yourself on a beach. People actually see a beach, they see water, they see chairs. So what you see in your mind's eye when you think of that apple, that is also how it will work with spirit. I don't think that, seeing a perfectly realistic apple is better than not. I just think it's different, and we all have different strengths. And again, you want to play to your strengths. So we're going to go through the 5 different levels, and we're going to talk about how it works, especially with mediumship and spirit. And just level the playing field, because if you are a 1, you might not know that 5s exists. If you are a 5 who sees nothing, you might not even know that 1s exists. So we're going to talk about that today. Just quickly, there are some announcements for what's going on here at Medium in the Middle HQ. Every year, once a year, I host the Advanced Reiki Practitioner Masterclass, and it is happening on April 25th, so save the date. And there's currently early bird pricing. So the early bird pricing will be available until February 22nd. If you are a Reiki Level 2 practitioner who is looking for continued education, and if you are interested in working in Reiki, this masterclass focuses on your client experience and advanced Reiki techniques to build you a repeat clientele that come back to you because you are the best, offering the best services. So it's a 4-hour masterclass. You can join me live or you can catch the replay, and you get access to the replay for 1 year. It is jam-packed and it is advanced. So I highly recommend this masterclass for 3 to 6 months after your Reiki level 2, specifically for those who want to work in Reiki. The early bird pricing is $333 Canadian, and it's ending on February 22nd. I will leave the links down below for you to grab that. The next mediumship practice circle is Saturday, February 28th. So if you want to practice your mediumship, I cannot stress enough, all levels are welcome. Yes, it can be your first time. No, you don't have to have any previous skills. This is the opportunity for you to test out and see what happens and sit with a stranger in a controlled environment with instructions from me. That next one is February 28th. It's a Saturday. The March Reiki level 1 is already sold out. That hasn't happened in a while. What is this, 2002? My courses used to always sell out months in advance. And now they still usually fill, but they'll fill like the week of. So the March level 1 is full. The next level 1 is April 11th and 12th. Level 2 in March is April 28th and 29th, and because of the advanced masterclass, there will be no level 2 in April. So your options are March or May for level 2. As always, I will leave all the links you need down below in the show notes. And if you are in the Banff area, I am doing a local event at Flow State on March 1st. It is a Reiki and restorative class, so if you are local, come check that out. Okay, so let's jump right back into this test. If you have Googled it, you will see the image, but even if you haven't, we're going to talk about it. So going back to that apple, I want you to see how vivid it is in your mind. Can you see the stem? Can you see a little leaf? Can you see the lighting on it? Does it feel like an outline? Is it in black and white? How vivid are the colors? So, and 1 on this scale is the perfectly realistic, as real as you are seeing an apple. When people say that they can see, how many blades of grass were on the floor and exactly the picture where it was on the wall, and they can remember their childhood bedroom perfectly with every little detail, that is the 1. So they can see a very, very realistic apple in their mind. Number 2 on the scale is still realistic and vivid, but it's not as detailed as 1. So you see grass, but you might not see the blades of grass. You remember your bedroom, but you might not remember every single thing on the wall. You can think of the apple, but it looks a little bit more cartoony than realistic. So that is a 2. Then we have the 3 on the scale. So a 3 is black and white. It's still, you can see that it's an apple. It might not be that detailed. It might not be that realistic. This is more of shadows. So this is more when you close your eyes, you see an apple, you see the outline, but there's not a lot of detail. There might not be a lot of color. That's a 3. And this is where I fall on the scale. When I talk about seeing spirits, I can just tell if they're tall or short. Did they have a lot of hair on their head? Did they have a very distinct jawline? Did they have glasses? I can see it like a shadow. I cannot see super detailed things as a 1, but I can see, it does feel black and white. On the odd time, I'll get a color, but I am a 3. So just so you know, that's how I see spirit, is more outlines, shadows is how it looks. So 1 is super vivid, very realistic. 2 is still pretty realistic, just not as many details. 3, we're starting to get into that black and white outlines. 4 is dim and vague. So you see an outline of an apple, but it's not that realistic. It doesn't have that many details, but you can still tell that it's an apple. So maybe you don't see any colors, you don't see the leaf, you don't see any lighting on it, but you could tell that there's an apple in your mind. And then 5 is nothing. There's no image. You know you're thinking of an apple, but you don't see anything in your mind's eye. So if you are a 5, you're part of the 2 to 5% of the people who have aphantasia. And aphantasia is the inability to picture something in your mind's eye. It's just a different way of thinking. It doesn't affect anything. It's just when we say picture an apple, what the 5s picture and what the 1s picture are different things. So I definitely didn't know this until I saw this chart. I didn't know that 5s existed, of people not seeing anything. I also didn't know that 1s existed, that people could see in that much detail. And I found this very interesting, so we were talking about it with our friends and asking everybody where they fell on the scale. And I actually have 2 friends that are a 5. And it was like, what do you mean you don't think of anything? She was like, no, I don't see anything in my mind. Like, if you told me to count sheep, I don't see sheep. She said, I always thought picture yourself on a beach was just metaphoric. She said, when I'm in yoga class and they're telling us to picture this and picture that and imagine this and imagine that, she said, I don't see anything. And I was like, that's so interesting. I was like, what about when you dream? What about when you read a book? Like, do you read to yourself? She was like, huh? And I was like, do you hear your own voice in your head when you're reading? Like when you're reading something, today is Thursday, and on Thursday I go to the store, and at the store I find. She's like, no, I just look at the words. I was like, what do you mean you just look at the words? You don't hear a voice in your head reading to you? So again, we're all different, and there's not one that's better than the other. So when I was talking about this on Instagram, if you don't already follow me at Medium in the Middle on Instagram, I'm also on TikTok, Substack, everywhere you can find me. Someone asked, can you change? Like, can you work really hard to become a 4 if you're a 3? Or do people change over the years? And from my experience, I don't think so. I've worked with a lot of people. I've mentored a lot of people, and it's just a lot easier to work with where you're at. I often find that I will say phrases like, oh, if you see this, if you see that, and people will respond, oh, I don't see anything. And I use see as kind of a general statement about just perception. So it doesn't matter if you see it in your mind's eye. Maybe you feel it. Maybe you know it. Maybe you just know that there's an apple there. However you perceive information for you, you want to play to your strengths, and everyone's strengths are different. So same thing with the clairs. Do I think you can develop clairs to become better? Yes, I do think that's like a muscle where if you are not clairaudient, you could try to work on your clairaudience. Does that mean you're going to start hearing things all the time? No. Do I think you could pay attention to see if you do hear something sometimes? Yes. But if you are a feeler or a knower, I do believe that those will always be your strongest suits, and you should work on your strongest suits. And of course, we want to work on our weaknesses as well. But focusing on your strengths will support you much more than trying to be a 1 on the scale instead of just focusing on, hey, I'm a 3. Who cares? Just work on what you can see. So I wanted to bring this to the podcast because I feel like not everybody knows that there's a scale. Not everybody knows that when you say picture a beach, not everyone pictures a beach, and some people are picturing the most realistic beach with the sand and the water and the chairs and how the sun is. And in order to be a medium, you don't have to be a 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to be able to see anything. There are so many different ways that spirit can communicate with you. And most people, when it comes to mediumship, are knowers. They just know or they just feel. And when you say, how did you know that? It's usually, oh, I don't know, I just knew. Well, I just felt it. It's not always you saw. Let's even use a common example of how people pass. You probably don't see someone passing from a heart attack or cancer. You feel that. You probably don't see how people are related to each other. You feel that. I feel like this is my daughter. I feel like this is my mom. I feel like this is my grandpa. So to be a medium, to be a good medium, to develop your mediumship, it does not matter where you are on this Aphantasia scale, whether you are a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, you still have access to mediumship. You still have access to spirit. I don't believe one is better than the other. I was actually having a conversation with a 5, so someone who sees nothing, and he felt like it was a superpower of his because he doesn't have a racing mind. He doesn't have things distracting him in his head. He can clearly feel or know or comprehend or receive things because he doesn't have lots of things in his mind. He doesn't have images in his mind that are distracting him. So he actually felt that it was a superpower not being able to see things because it removes distractions. And it made it a lot easier to also clear the mind so that you can receive. And we know in anything spiritual, we always have to have that clear state of mind. You cannot be thinking if you want to be receiving information from spirit or your intuition. I've talked about this a million times on the podcast, but really a very big skill to learn is your thinking brain versus your receiving brain. And knowing the difference of when you're receiving information from spirit, from your intuition, from your guides, versus when you're thinking, that is a skill. And I highly recommend you just start to notice, am I thinking or did I just receive? Just a quick tip on that, because I know I've done lots of episodes on this. Receiving is usually very fast. You don't have time to think. Whoa, I have a lady, she's 63, she's really short, she has 3 sisters, I feel like she had a green car and she really liked apple pie. Whoa. There was no time to think in that. If you're like, I think it's a woman, it might be a grandmother, I'm seeing something maybe on a plate, that's probably your thinking brain. And you want to get out of your thinking brain. So I do think that 5s have an advantage because, like my friend said, they don't have distractions. They can easily think about nothing. They can easily clear their mind. They can easily meditate. They can easily do all of these things that other people struggle with. So again, it's not better if you're a 1, worse if you're a 5. You just want to play to your strengths. And also knowing that 1s exist versus 5s, I find is very interesting because especially as I mentor people, I need to watch my language. I can't say things like, oh, you'll see this. Not everyone sees that. So I need to speak to the 1s who see things, and I also need to speak to the 5s who don't see things when I'm teaching or when I'm mentoring or when I'm trying to support people with their mediumship, knowing that there's 1s and there's 5s and a bunch of us fall in between. So if you're looking at this scale, I am a 3. I see shadows. I sometimes get colors, but it's more I can tell the outlines of things. I can tell a very tall person or a very short person. I can tell if they were bigger set or small. I could tell if they had something very distinct on their body, but I couldn't give you every detail of what your grandpa looked like from head to toes. I would just get a few, again, very distinct things that I see in my mind. And there are certain things that I have a very difficult time picturing, like when people say, count sheep. I have a very hard time counting sheep. When I think of a beach, imagine a beach. My beach is very, if I were to draw it with a pencil, there'd be some waves, there'd be a beach, and there'd be a sun in the sky, like very basic. But that does not affect my mediumship because I feel and know a lot of things. So I rely mostly on what I see and what I know. If I see a really tall man, I'll say that. If I see, lots of hair on someone's head, I'll say that. But that's not my strongest suit, so I don't dwell on that. And I hope this episode, especially if you're a 3, 4, or 5, helps you to know that you shouldn't dwell on that. It is not something that is bad. It's not a skill that you can really develop, in my opinion. However, knowing where you are is good to know. So the majority of people will probably fall between that 2 to 4 range. They call the number 1s the hyper aphantasia, and then the 5s is aphantasia. So the ability to not see anything. So I will also post a few pictures on my Instagram. So if you want to check that out or Google it, just Google the Aphantasia test and you will see the range 1 to 5. and see where you fall and go from there. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. I hope perhaps you learned something new. I did not know fives existed until this past summer, and I was blown away. I had so many questions for my two friends that are fives. I was like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And they were like, nope, nothing. Yep, nothing. Nope, nothing. I was like, picture pizza. Nothing. An apple. Nothing. My face. Nothing. You as a 4-year-old. Nothing. And it's just really interesting to see how everyone sees things differently. But that's the beauty of everyone being a unique individual, but also the different ways that people get information from spirit, their intuition, their spirit guides, it's coming from a lot of different ways. There's no right or wrong way. There's no better way. It's just whatever is the easiest way for you. I feel like that should be my tagline. We're just trying to find the easiest way for you to do anything, to do your mediumship, to do your Reiki, to listen to your intuition, to figure out what your guides are saying. We're trying to find the easiest way for you, because the easiest way for you is going to be different than me and Bob and Susie and your neighbor, and everyone's going to be different, but you need to find the easiest way for you. So thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Medium in the Middle. If you'd like to book an appointment with me, I offer my services virtually via Zoom all over the world and right here in Banff in person. I will leave all the links you need down below if you would like to register for a mediumship practice circle, for a Reiki course, or to jump on the advanced Reiki practitioner masterclass early bird pricing. Again, that ends on Sunday, so it's a very short window for early bird. Jump on that. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I release new episodes every Wednesday. But until next Wednesday, Midlers, when I see you in your ears, I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye, everybody.